The morning Daniel Carter walked out on his wife and their critically ill daughter, he had no idea Sarah had just secured a $50 billion infrastructure contract, the largest government deal in the nation's history. He was too busy texting his mistress to notice the certification email that arrived at 6:47 a.m. Sarah Carter, a brilliant civil engineer who'd spent 15 years building her consulting firm from their garage while he climbed corporate ladders using her connections, stood in their kitchen holding their daughter Emma's medical bills in one hand and divorce papers in the other. She watched the man she'd sacrificed everything for low designer suitcases into a car she'd helped him buy. He divorced her that very afternoon, signing away his rights to Emma, their sick child fighting leukemia, all to marry Victoria Chen, the wealthy heiress who promised him the executive position and lifestyle he believed he deserved. But what would happen when he discovered what he'd just thrown away? How would the man who abandoned his dying daughter react when the woman he discarded for poverty became the most powerful contractor in the country? And what would Sarah do when the husband who called her a failure stood before her, realizing his mistress's fortune was nothing compared to the empire his ex-wife now controlled? Sarah's fingers trembled as she signed the final medical consent form, her eyes burning from another sleepless night at Children's Memorial Hospital. Emma lay in the bed beside her, small and fragile, her 7-year-old body fighting a battle no child should face. The leukemia diagnosis had come 18 months ago. The same week Sarah's engineering firm had been shortlisted for the federal infrastructure project. She'd spent every moment since then balancing hospital vigils with proposal revisions, working on a laptop in waiting rooms and taking calls from government officials while holding Emma's hand during chemotherapy. Daniel had been there initially, or so she'd thought, but his presence had become increasingly sporadic, his excuses more elaborate, and his irritation more obvious whenever Emma's treatment conflicted with his schedule. The apartment they'd moved into after Daniel insisted they downsize felt suffocating in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah had argued against leaving their modest house, but he'd convinced her they needed to cut costs, that her business was draining their savings, and that sacrifices had to be made. She'd agreed, believing his concern was genuine, not understanding that he was already planning his exit and building a new life with Victoria Chen, the daughter of Marcus Chen, CEO of Chen Industries. Sarah had met Victoria once at a networking event, had watched Daniel's eyes linger too long on the woman's diamond jewelry, and had dismissed her own unease as paranoia born of exhaustion. She brewed instant coffee as the city began to wake, staring at her laptop screen without really seeing it. The government portal showed a notification, but her mind was too foggy to process it. Emma had been up most of the night with pain, and Sarah had held her, singing softly and promising everything would be okay, even as her own world crumbled. Daniel hadn't come home again. His text at 2 a.m. had been brief. Working late, don't wait up. She'd stopped waiting up weeks ago, stopped expecting him to share the burden of their daughter's illness, and stopped hoping he'd ask about her work or show interest in the proposal that represented 15 years of her career. When he finally came home that evening, his irritability filled the small apartment like toxic gas. He slammed his briefcase down, loosened his tie with aggressive movements, and barely glanced at Emma's medication schedule on the refrigerator. Sarah was preparing dinner, something simple because the medical bills left little room for groceries, and she could feel his judgment radiating across the kitchen. "This is what we've become," he said, gesturing at the cramped space, the second-hand furniture, and the stack of medical bills on the counter. "This poverty, this struggle. I can't do this anymore, Sarah." Her hand stilled over the cutting board. "Daniel, the proposal decision is coming any day now. If we get this contract, if!" His fist hit the table, making the cheap plates rattle. "That's all I've heard for years. If the contract comes through, if Emma gets better, if we can just hold on a little longer. I'm tired of holding on to nothing." She turned to face him, seeing a stranger where her husband should be. Emma needs us, both of us. The treatments are working, the doctor said. Emma needs a father who isn't drowning, he interrupted, but his eyes couldn't meet hers. I've been offered a position, a real position, Vice President of Development at Chen Industries. Marcus Chen himself wants me on his team. Something cold settled in Sarah's chest. The Chen family? Victoria Chen's father? His jaw tightened. Yes, Victoria recommended me. She sees my potential, unlike some people who only see a paycheck to support their failing dreams. The cruelty of his words struck like a physical blow. Sarah had used her industry connections to get Daniel his current job, had worked tirelessly to help him climb corporate ladders, while her own business struggled, and had sacrificed her own advancement to support his ambitions. Now he stood in their kitchen, in the apartment he'd forced them into, calling her dreams failures while planning a future that didn't include her or their dying daughter. What are you saying? She whispered, though she already knew. I'm saying I want out. I want a divorce. The Chens think I'm single, driven, unattached. Marcus is talking about making me his son-in-law, about giving me real power. Staying married to you would ruin everything. She gripped the counter, her vision blurring. Emma is your daughter. She's fighting for her life, and you want to abandon her for a job? I'll pay child support, he said mechanically, as if he'd rehearsed this. But I can't be tied to this life anymore. Victoria and her family can give me everything I've worked for. Don't make this harder than it has to be. That night, after he'd packed essentials and left, Sarah sat by the window of Emma's room, watching her daughter sleep amidst a heartbreaking network of tubes and monitors. She had promised herself she would work harder, sacrifice more, and somehow make Daniel happy again. But watching Emma's chest rise and fall, she realized her daughter was the only thing that mattered, her daughter and the contract that could save them both. The next morning, Sarah finally opened the email notification that had been waiting since Daniel walked out. Her hands shook as she read it once, twice, 3 times, unable to believe the words on the screen. Her firm, Carter Engineering Solutions, had been awarded the National Infrastructure Modernization Project, a $50 billion contract spanning 10 years, the largest federal infrastructure deal in United States history. She'd won. After 15 years of building her expertise, of innovative designs and sustainable solutions, of proving herself in a male-dominated industry, she'd actually won. She should have called Daniel immediately, should have screamed with joy, celebrated, and shared this moment with the man who'd been her partner for 12 years. But Daniel was gone, having already filed divorce papers through his attorney that morning. Papers that arrived by courier with cruel efficiency. He wanted nothing. No alimony, no assets, no custody. He was surrendering his parental rights to Emma, citing the burden of medical costs and his inability to provide adequate care. The paperwork was designed to free him completely, to erase his family like a bad investment. Sarah sat in the hospital cafeteria, the contract notification on her tablet, and the divorce papers on the table. 2 realities that couldn't coexist but somehow did. Emma was upstairs receiving treatment, and Sarah had just become one of the most powerful contractors in the country. Yet she'd never felt more alone. She thought about calling Daniel, about telling him what he had just walked away from, but something stopped her. Pride, perhaps, or maybe the realization that a man who could abandon his sick daughter for money didn't deserve to know about her success. Instead, she called her attorney, then her accountant, then the handful of employees who'd stayed with her firm through the lean years. Within hours, the news was public. Carter Engineering Solutions had won the impossible bid, and Sarah Carter was being hailed as a visionary. Her phone exploded with interview requests, partnership offers, and congratulations from colleagues who'd watched her struggle. The governor called personally, as did 3 senators. Her company's value skyrocketed overnight, but Daniel remained silent, unreachable, already deep in his new life with Victoria Chen. Sarah learned through mutual acquaintances that the engagement had been announced at an exclusive party the same night he'd left. He'd proposed to Victoria with a ring that cost more than Emma's monthly treatment. The wedding was scheduled for 6 weeks away, a lavish affair at the Chen estate. Marcus Chen had promoted Daniel immediately, making him vice president as promised, and giving him everything he'd wanted. Sarah threw herself into work with fierce determination, managing Emma's treatment schedule around conference calls with federal officials and hiring specialists with her signing bonus to ensure her daughter had the best care money could buy. She moved them into a better apartment closer to the hospital with actual bedrooms and natural light. Emma's doctors were cautiously optimistic. The treatments were working, and with better nutrition and reduced stress, her daughter was slowly improving. Still, Sarah couldn't escape the wedding invitation that arrived 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Heavy cardstock with embossed gold lettering. Victoria Chen and Daniel Carter request your presence. She stared at it for hours, this artifact of betrayal made tangible. Her best friend Jennifer found her that evening with tears streaming down her face. The invitation crumpled in her hand. "Don't go," Jennifer begged, taking the invitation and throwing it in the trash. "He doesn't deserve to see you. He doesn't deserve anything from you." But Sarah shook her head, something crystallizing inside her. "I have to go. I need to see him marry her. I need to close this chapter completely to see what he chose over Emma and me. Maybe then I can finally let go." The morning of the wedding, Jennifer arrived with a navy blue dress, elegant and understated, perfectly tailored to Sarah's frame. "If you're going to do this, you're going to look stunning," she declared, helping Sarah with her hair and makeup. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone different from the exhausted woman Daniel had left. She saw strength, resilience, a woman who'd survived abandonment and emerged more powerful. The Chen estate was magnificent, with sprawling gardens and a colonial mansion that spoke of generational wealth. Crystal chandeliers lit marble hallways, and elegant guests in designer clothes filled every corner. Sarah felt their stares immediately and heard the whispered speculation. Who was she? Why was she here? Didn't she know this was Victoria Chen's day? Some recognized her from recent business news, their whispers turning to confusion. Sarah Carter, the infrastructure mogul. What is she doing at Daniel Carter's wedding? She stood at the back of the ceremony hall, Jennifer's hand tied in hers, watching Daniel wait at the altar. He wore a custom tuxedo and looked polished and confident, every inch the successful executive he'd always wanted to be. When Victoria appeared in her designer gown, $50,000 of lace and silk, Daniel's face lit with the ambition Sarah had once mistaken for love. They exchanged vows she couldn't bear to hear, promises that should have been sacred, but meant nothing to a man who'd broken them so easily before. At the reception, the whispers grew louder. Daniel had spotted her, his face draining of color, but Victoria was oblivious, radiant in her happiness. Sarah accepted champagne from a passing waiter, her composure perfect even as her heart ached. She'd come for closure, to prove to herself that she could survive this and that his choice couldn't destroy her. Daniel's mother, Patricia, approached with ice in her eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed quietly. "Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? My son has moved on to better things. Don't cause a scene." Sarah met her gaze steadily. "I came only to wish Daniel happiness. I have no intention of causing trouble. I'm leaving soon." But before she could go, Marcus Chen took the microphone, his voice commanding the room's attention. He spoke eloquently about family values, trust, and the importance of integrity in business and marriage. Sarah felt Jennifer tense beside her and sensed something building in the air. "Before we celebrate this union," Marcus continued, his expression hardening, "I need to address something that's come to my attention. I built my company on honesty, and I expect the same from those who join my family. 2 days ago, I received an anonymous report about Daniel's past. I hired investigators hoping to disprove it, but what they found was deeply troubling. The room fell silent. Victoria turned to her father, confusion crossing her face. Daniel looked like he might be sick. Daniel Carter, Marcus said coldly, presented himself to my family as a single, ambitious professional. But he failed to mention that he was married for 12 years, that he has a 7-year-old daughter fighting leukemia, and that he divorced his wife and abandoned his sick child just weeks ago to pursue this relationship. Gasps rippled through the crowd. All eyes found Sarah, still standing at the back, frozen in place. Daniel was shaking his head frantically, but Marcus wasn't finished. His ex-wife is here tonight. As some of you may have noticed, that's Sarah Carter, founder of Carter Engineering Solutions, the woman who just won the largest infrastructure contract in federal history. A $50 billion deal announced the same day Daniel divorced her. The same woman who used her industry connections to advance his career, who supported his ambitions while building her own company, and who bore the burden of their child's illness largely alone. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes finding Sarah's across the room. The bride looked shattered and betrayed as the truth unraveled her wedding day. Daniel tried to speak, but Marcus cut him off with a gesture. I cannot, in good conscience, welcome into my family a man who hides his failures behind lies, who abandons his responsibilities to chase wealth, and who discards loyalty when it becomes inconvenient. The position is rescinded. This marriage is cancelled. Daniel Carter, you are no longer welcome in my home or my company. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Victoria was crying, her mother holding her as she stared at Daniel with devastated eyes. Guests whispered frantically, their judgment now focused on the groom instead of the uninvited ex-wife. Daniel stood alone at the altar, his carefully constructed new life collapsing around him, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. Sarah remained still, vindicated by truth but taking no joy in Daniel's public destruction. Jennifer squeezed her hand as Victoria approached, mascara streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Victoria whispered. He told me you were toxic, that you tried to trap him with a baby, that you'd taken everything from him. I believed him. I'm so sorry about your daughter. How could he leave her? Sarah's voice was steady. Money can't fix a dishonest heart. I hope you find someone worthy of you. Marcus Chen approached next, his expression respectful. Mrs. Carter, I apologize for the role my family played in your pain. Your integrity and resilience in the face of such betrayal are remarkable. If there's anything I can do. There's nothing needed, Sarah said gently. I came for closure and I found it. I'm going home to my daughter now. As she turned to leave, the crowd parted before her. Their earlier mockery transformed into quiet admiration. She walked out with her head high, Jennifer beside her. Surprisingly, Victoria followed them to the entrance. Can I visit? Victoria asked hesitantly. Can I help somehow with your daughter's treatment or your business or anything? Sarah studied the younger woman, seeing genuine remorse. When the dust settles, if you truly want to help, come to the children's hospital. Emma loves visitors who bring books. In the days following the cancelled wedding, Sarah's story spread through the business community and beyond. She became a symbol, the woman who'd been discarded for poverty and emerged a billionaire contractor, the mother who'd fought for her daughter while her husband pursued luxury, the engineer who'd built an empire while the man who doubted her fell from grace. Interview requests flooded in, but Sarah declined them all. Her focus was Emma, whose treatment was finally showing significant improvement, and her company, whose workforce was expanding rapidly to meet the contract's demands. Victoria Chen appeared at the children's hospital 3 weeks later, her arms full of books and her face free of makeup, looking nothing like the glamorous heiress from the wedding. She and Sarah talked quietly while Emma slept, and something unexpected bloomed between them. Not friendship exactly, but understanding. Victoria had been deceived, had believed Daniel's carefully crafted lies, because she'd wanted to believe in the romance he'd sold her. She was genuinely remorseful and determined to make amends. Marcus Chen followed his daughter's lead, meeting with Sarah to discuss a potential partnership. His company specialized in manufacturing, while hers focused on design and engineering. Together, they could dominate the infrastructure sector. Sarah listened carefully, remembering how Daniel had painted the Chens as his ticket to success, not realizing that real success came from competence and integrity, not marriage schemes. "I'll consider it," Sarah said, "but not as charity. If we partner, it's because our companies complement each other and because the work benefits from collaboration. I've built everything I have through merit, and I won't compromise that now." Marcus smiled, respect clear in his eyes. "I wouldn't expect anything less. That's why I'm proposing it." The partnership formed slowly, built on professional respect rather than personal drama. Victoria became a regular presence in Sarah's life, visiting Emma weekly and bringing gifts and laughter to the hospital room. She used her family's connections to raise awareness and funding for pediatric cancer research, channeling her guilt into action. Sarah watched her carefully at first, but Victoria's consistency won her over. Daniel himself tried to contact Sarah repeatedly. His texts started angry, blaming her for his downfall and insisting she'd orchestrated his humiliation. When she didn't respond, the messages turned desperate, then pleading. He showed up at her new office building once, but security turned him away. Finally, 6 months after the wedding that never was, he sent a message asking to meet at Riverside Park, the place where he'd proposed to her 13 years earlier. Sarah almost didn't go. Emma was in remission now, her hair growing back and her laughter filling their home again. The Carter-Chen partnership was thriving, creating jobs and revolutionizing infrastructure across 3 states. Her life had moved forward, and Daniel was part of a painful past she'd worked hard to overcome. But something in his message suggested he'd finally reached rock bottom, and despite everything, a small part of her needed to close this chapter completely. He looked terrible when she found him on their old bench. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and his eyes hollow. The confident executive had vanished, leaving behind a broken man who'd gambled everything and lost. "Sarah," he started, his voice cracking, "I'm so sorry for everything. For Emma, for leaving, for being so blind and stupid and selfish. I threw away everything that mattered for things that meant nothing. Can you ever forgive me?" She sat beside him, leaving careful distance between them. "I forgive you, Daniel. Not for you, but for me. Because carrying anger only hurts myself. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You made choices that showed me exactly who you are, and I believe you." "I've lost everything," he said. "My job, my reputation. Victoria, the Chens have blacklisted me in the industry. No one will hire me. And Emma," his voice broke, "I abandoned my daughter when she needed me most. What kind of father does that?" "The kind who valued ambition over love," Sora said quietly. "The kind who saw his family as obstacles instead of blessings. You didn't lose everything, Daniel. You traded it. You traded our family for what you thought was a better deal, and you learned too late that some things can't be bought or rebuilt." "Can I see her?" he asked desperately. "Can I see Emma? I know I don't deserve it, but—" "You signed away your rights," Sarah reminded him. "You chose to stop being her father. She's doing better now, thriving actually, and I won't disrupt her healing with your guilt. Maybe someday when she's older, if she wants to know you, that will be her choice. But not now, not like this." He nodded, tears streaming down his face, and Sarah felt pity rather than satisfaction. His punishment was living with his choices, and that was justice enough. "I hope you rebuild your life," she said, standing. "I hope you learn what real worth means, not money or status, but integrity and perseverance and showing up for the people who need you. But you'll have to learn that on your own. Goodbye, Daniel." She walked away, lighter than she'd felt in years, leaving him on the bench where he'd once promised to love her forever. The promises had been broken, but she'd kept her own. To Emma, to herself, and to the work that defined her. She'd turned pain into power, betrayal into a business empire, and learned that the love she'd lost had simply been making room for something better. Self-respect, purpose, and a future built on her own terms. 6 months later, Carter Engineering Solutions opened its 5th regional office, and Emma rang the ceremonial bell at the New York Stock Exchange when Sarah took the company public. Victoria stood with them, a true friend now, and Jennifer was there too, the loyal companion who'd never wavered. The photographers captured them together. 3 women from different paths, united by trials that had tested them and from which they had emerged stronger. Sarah's story became legend in business schools, a case study in resilience and ethical leadership. But to her, it was simply the truth. That betrayal couldn't destroy a person rooted in self-respect. That real power came from integrity rather than manipulation. And that sometimes the best revenge was building a life so beautiful that the past couldn't touch it. She had been discarded as worthless and had proven her worth beyond measure, not for Daniel's benefit, but for her own. And that made all the difference.